take on the integration movement. Could you tell us about your perspective on what integration should be? You have suggested the theoretical progressive integration. You say, and I'm quoting you, that at the heart of this perspective is a concern with epistemological criteria for integration, and the ideal candidate approaches for psychotherapy integration would be different models of therapy that showed strong convergence at core levels but considerable diversity at strategical levels.
Well, I would place that assertion of mine both at a place in my own development that was some time ago, almost 20 years ago, and I would also defend it as an approach among other possibilities. I wouldn't see it as a preemptive possibility, the only way that integration should be pursued. It is to say that at theoretical and practical levels, the borrowing from different perspectives cannot be what we would call in English hodgepodge, that is a kind of random integration. When we see this done, we see therapies just become aesthetically ugly and practically confusing to the participants.
Yes.
So if I'm eliciting the deep narrative, the structure of the deep context of your life and your core meanings and beliefs, and then I take the advantage afforded by that deep disclosure maybe of your spiritual beliefs and so on in order to chastise you and to dispute them empirically and so on, then one has shifted paradigms incoherently, right? From a kind of constructivist appreciation of your uniqueness to a kind of hegemonic stance of authority. And I think that those kinds of shifts where you might move from a deep narrative procedure to a thought record that disputes its premises, that would be an example of something that I would regard as an incoherent kind of integration. On the other hand, there are many coherent ones, so that one might be working in a deep narrative way with an individual, but embedding that person in the context of his or her family, and understanding then, maybe through the use of Milan-style circular questions, the way in which the positions of others on the story you're telling may differ from your own. And we might ask, whose story is most like Aníbal's? Whose is least like his?
Yes.
And I would see this as a coherent integration, because it respects the same premises about the in some way the personal priority of meaning, but also then looks at them as something that would be negotiated in social discourse, particularly within families or communities.
Would you say this theoretical progressive integration is somehow happening around the models?
Oh, who knows?
Who knows?
I'll leave that to wiser heads to judge than mine.
Yes. In recent years, was there any positive signs in the field of psychotherapy that you would like to point out, and negative ones?
Well, let's start with the bad news.
Bad news.
I do think that not only in the U.S. but also increasingly in Europe, and it's beginning to find expression as well in Eastern countries, we do have more and more and more domination of the training bases, at least in university settings, and certainly of the research literature, more and more domination by a single perspective or one that has minor variations. And that is a kind of cognitive behavioral one with the intolerance that it often shows for other perspectives. And I think that that's an unfortunate thing. I think in the same way that we should be protecting biodiversity on the planet, in the same way that we should be respecting diversity among peoples and beliefs, in the same way we want to support many forms of artistic expression and literature, in the same way that we want to support competing scientific theories that are pursuing similar objectives. In this way, too, we really should be looking to support novelty and diversity in psychotherapy and psychotherapy research. And I do fear that that goal is being subordinated to a kind of administrative, rule-based orientation, which is really predicated on economic concerns more than psychological ones. and I regret that. There are also, I think, many positive developments. There are lots of interesting approaches to therapy that continue to be developed and refined, and I think that increasingly novel approaches to therapy are being tested with respect to identifiable forms of human distress and pain, and found to make a useful contribution to those. I think that that's a very salutary or positive development.
No doubt.